Never have a baby if you use this acne treatment. You may have seen warnings of Accutane, which is a brand name for the chemical isotretinoin, because it's a potent teratogen, which is a word that means causing severe birth defects. Even if taken for a short period of time, babies will be born with no ears and no eyes. Like, Accutane is a serious teratogen. Yes, alcohol is a teratogen, but this simple acne treatment is far worse than anything alcohol could ever produce. Accutane will cause craniofacial deformities, which includes the absence of ears, a cleft palate, microcephaly, and countless other facial abnormalities. It causes congenital heart defects, meaning the heart or blood vessels near the heart don't develop. It causes severe neurological issues, as well as also being born without a thymus gland. What is a thymus gland, I hear you ask? Well, it is deemed the function of producing and maturing immune cells and T cells. Without a thymus gland, you're missing a vital part of your immune system. You have no help to fight infection, disease, and foreign substances, and you'll pretty much be sick for your entire life, as well as developing a multitude of autoimmune diseases like these. It's not very common to survive all these ailments, but if they do, they will likely live with heavy fluids in the brain and obvious intellectual and developmental disabilities. Don't even look at a pregnant woman if you use Accutane at this point. But in all seriousness, this is why being honest with your doctor is important. Accutane is relatively safe and effective for adults, but even for already living babies, it's very dangerous. So, trust your doctor and don't use Accutane if you really don't have to. Gene K. Whitefeather and Donald Ray Lance were just caught trafficking kids into slavery. Gene and Donald had been targeting young black kids for years and adopting them for their race, not because they loved black people, but because they thought they would be fit for slavery. You heard that right. Rich white people in West Virginia who hate black people were adopting black kids into slavery. The kids are aged 6, 9, 11, 14, and 16, and this is where they lived. This may look like some sort of broken down barn used for animals years ago, but in reality, this is where Gene and Donald kept their 5 slaves. Gene claimed the old broken down barn was a teenage clubhouse, and that they loved being in there. But upon questioning, the kids admitted to being locked in there for 12 hours after their last meal every day, and only allowed out to work. A wellness check found the 14-year-old and 16-year-old locked in a shed, and the 14-year-old had untreated open wounds on his feet. The kids explained how they were forced to sleep on the concrete every night, and that they always wore the same dirty outfit, which was corroborated by the police when they smelt the terrible odor coming off of them. Gene and Donald are now facing charges like human trafficking of a minor child, use of a minor child in forced labor, and child neglect creating substantial risk of serious bodily injury. Their bonds were set at $200,000 each, but their family is rich and has hundreds of acres of land and lots of money. So, Gene's brother posted their bonds and freed them. So the prosecutor turned around and raised both their bonds to $500,000 each, and they were taken back to jail where they are now. Lately, people have been saying Americans are eating GMO, unnatural, fake chemical strawberries after comparing against European strawberries. The main point people make is, the American strawberries are white on the inside, and the ones from Europe are red all the way through and a lot smaller. People are going so far as to say America is poisoning its citizens by giving them fake strawberries. But let's turn off the monkey brain mode and just chill with the conspiracies for like 45 seconds. And let's think about another fruit, apples. What's your favorite type of apple? Granny Smith? Honeycrisp? Any of the other 7,500 different types of apples that come in small, large, red, green, orange, yellow, with sours and sweets and bitter flavors? I prefer the Granny Smith personally, but that's not the point of this video. Returning to the strawberries. Imagine a set of 7,500 types of apples that we go out on a crazy limb and say there are at least 2 different types of strawberries. But instead of being green and sour, they taste nearly exactly identical. One just has a different pigment inside and grows a little bit larger. Would you be able to believe that? Because there's actually over 600 varieties of strawberries, and I'm sorry to tell you, they don't all look the same. When it comes down to it, Europe prefers the flavor of
Camarosa, Fortuna, Sabrina,
and they just so happen to be smaller than Americans' favorites,
Honey Oi, or Le Glow, and All Stars.
Now, be quiet and eat your dang strawberries. Unless you're like me, then they really are poisonous because I'm allergic. Other than that, no, strawberries are not poisoning the masses. The deadliest airplane crash ever, also known as the Tenerife airport disaster. On March 27, 1977, KLM Flight 4805 initiated its takeoff prematurely during unusually dense fog, while Pan Am Flight 1736 was still sitting on the runway. By the time the captain of the KLM flight realized he was on a collision course with the Pan Am flight, he tried a very hard and early liftoff. But of course, it was too late, and the KLM flight tore straight through the Pan Am flight, which ended in 248 people on the KLM flight dying and 335 people on the Pan Am flight dying. But even though this was a horrific crash, 61 people on the Pan Am flight actually survived. They lived due to being seated in the front of the aircraft. It's hard to believe anyone could survive this, especially because the fires on the runway were so large and so hot, it took hours to extinguish them. This tiny airport normally never saw these kinds of huge, fully loaded flights, but Degando Airport had a bomb explode that day, so many surrounding airports had flights diverted. Multiple investigations proved that the KLM's captain's decision to take off before given clearance was the cause of the crash. So, KLM was deemed financially responsible for compensating the relatives of every one of the victims. Aside from American Airlines Flight 11 and United Airlines Flight 175, which both crashed on September 11th of 2001, this is the deadliest airplane crash in history. The Byford Dolphin incident. On November 5th, in 1983, at approximately 4 a.m., the Byford Dolphin, which was a semi-submersible drilling rig owned by, you guessed it, Dolphin Drilling, had a grave mistake take place. 4 divers, Edwin, Roy, Bjorn, and Truls, were inside of the decompression chamber. Edwin and Roy were both in the resting area, asleep, while Bjorn and Truls had just finished coming up from a diving bell, a system that helped them travel up and down in the water for their work. The diving bell was escorted by 2 dive tenders, who were William and Martin, but while Bjorn and Truls were finishing unloading from their dive, they shut the door to the diving bell, which was what they always did. See, the standard procedure included 5 steps. Step 1, close the door to the diving bell. Step 2, increase pressure in the diving bell to seal the door. Step 3, close the door to the main decompression chamber. Step 4, slowly drop the pressure in between the bell and the chamber. And step 5, separate the bell from the decompression chamber. While they had already completed step 1, and the team was just finishing up step 2, William, one of the diving tenders, skipped straight to step 5 for some unknown reason. And because step 3 was not completed, the door to the main decompression chamber was still open. The atmospheric pressure in the chamber was 9 atmospheres, and outside was obviously 1. So within a second, the chamber exploded to equalize into a single atmosphere. When this happened, the pressure blew the diving bell away at extreme speed, which hit William, the tender who disconnected the bell prematurely, which killed him instantly. Edwin, Roy, and Bjorn, 3 of the 4 divers in the chamber, died from what can be called internal explosion from decompression. But luckily for them, their deaths happened in under a second. It was so quick, their brains never got a chance to process it. Turles, on the other hand, was closer in proximity to the door, while the instant decompression was happening, which caused his body to be forced out of the chamber through the opening in the door that was only 24 inches wide. He was instantly dismembered, and all of his organs were sucked out of his abdomen. His arms and legs flew off, his body was bisected, and his remnants looked only vaguely human. There is a photo of him on the internet, but I would not suggest to go look for it. Only a single person in the operation made it out alive, dive tender Martin, though he was severely injured. Sadly, he had no insight on why the other dive tender skipped straight to step 5 and disconnected the dive bell prematurely. Though, the leading theory is, after the 12-hour shift, William was tired and did it by mistake. Believe it or not, only after 26 years of legal battles, in 2008, were the families actually offered a settlement for their loved ones for working and ultimately perishing in unsafe conditions. Interesting as frick. This is a condition known as dense asteroid hyalosis. It can cause you to see more floaters than the average person, but typically, the people who have it usually don't have a problem with it enough to get any sort of surgery. So people with dense asteroid hyalosis just live normal lives with cooler looking eyes. This is the most expensive cow ever, which goes by, however you say this name,
Viatina 19 FIV Mara Imóveis,
and was sold for $4.8 million in Brazil in June of last year. The reason she sold for so much was her superior genetics. Her embryos will be used to breed a ton of super superior babies, and apparently that's where the real value is. Next, an oil diver coming up from working down below. As you can tell, they work in complete darkness, which takes an incredible amount of skill. This guy knows everything he's doing, but Mr. Flip-Flops over here, I don't think he's too high up on a ladder. Lastly, this is how a scorpion poops. I just thought you should see that. Top 5 animals you've never seen before. Number 5, the crimson horned pheasant. They're from the Himalayan regions of India and perform beautiful mating dances. They can also live over 20 years, so they get pretty old for a bird. Number 4, the archerfish. As you can see, they got their names because of their unique hunting technique of shooting down land-based insects with a burst of water they spit from their mouths. Number 3, the Australian masked lapwing. This one in particular is showing off its famous mask, and they're pretty much tied with the killdeer for making nests in the worst spot possible, like on the side of a busy road with 3 branches as a nest. Pitiful. Number 2, the Elipica. They were only discovered in 1983, and after that discovery, they weren't seen until 2002. These little teddy bear looking animals are so rare, only 29 individuals have ever been seen. Little are known about them, but like everything else good in this world, global warming, and land encroachments are putting these little guys at danger for going extinct. And number 1, the Damascus goat. You won't see these ugly ducklings at your average petting zoo. They can be really cute as babies, but when they grow up, they selectively bred abominations turn into hideous monsters. Yet, weirdly enough, a Damascus goat from Saudi Arabia won the most beautiful goat category. Some people love them. I think they look like a burnt, squished grilled cheese sandwich. Not my thing. Top 5 ugliest baby animals. Number 5, the baby wombat. These things come out looking like a human-rat hybrid, and that will never sit right with me. Number 4, the baby echidna, who looks like a diseased baby wombat. I imagine if you blow a tardigrade up 100 times its size, this is the monstrosity it would turn into. It's like, where do I start? I don't like that thing, I don't like this thing, and I'm certainly not a fan of its eye crust. Not cute. Number 3, the baby Sumatran rhino. Were you aware that they had hair? Because I wasn't informed that they had hair. Baby rhinos are usually cute, but I just can't get over its fur looking so out of place. It's like Uncanny Valley, Baby Rhino edition. I mean, even when they lose it, they're still funny looking, so there's just no hope until it grows up, I guess. Number 2, the baby eye. And it's not number 1 because this is somehow the cutest it will ever be. A grown-up eye looks like what I expect an alien's pet would look like, and the fact that it's all downhill from here is just sad. Every other year these things pop up, and people call them cute, and I can never actually tell if those people are trolling or if they really find these things cute. And number 1, the newborn alpaca. This thing looks like a regular alpaca that got some sort of zombie disease and is ready to infect all other alpacas as patient 0. Them long limbs and the floppy wet body is just too much. If you know anyone who owns alpaca, tell them to stop breeding them things right now, due to the simple fact their babies look like a living blood clot. Time out. Commercial break. Only 7% of you guys are subscribed. Help me change that. 92.4 of you guys subscribe right now while you're watching the video. That way you never miss one of these. Do you remember Momo? Making the rounds in 2018 was an objectively creepy face, and along with it came the notorious Momo ... challenge. In fact, looking it up results in this pop-up about dangerous challenges and your well-being. It was said that Momo from a mysterious WhatsApp number would message you and threaten you and convince you to cause harm to yourself. It went so far that public warnings of Momo were given out by Argentina, Germany, Luxembourg, Spain, Canada, Mexico, and the US, showing how she became a worldwide phenomenon. WhatsApp even put out a message saying to immediately block all numbers that claimed to be Momo. She was more than the average creepypasta, somehow scratching her creepy little feet into the real world, and had many kids scared to even open up certain apps on their phones. Yet, folklorists, whose job it is to study urban legends, have agreed it was a case of moral panic, or a sensationalized hoax fueled by unverified media. It's not truly known if anyone was actually harmed during this worldwide panic, but the fear of Momo itself was as real as it gets. In 2019, the famous statue depicting Momo was destroyed because of all the harm it caused and public outrage from the parents scared the trend would continue if the statue is still around. This is John Brower Minnick, the heaviest person to ever live on planet Earth. And before you ask, yes, he was American. Born on September 29th, 1941 in Seattle, Washington, by the time he was an adult, he reached the peak human weight of 1,400 pounds. At 6'1", his tiny 110-pound wife and himself actually hold the largest weight disparity between a married couple, since he was over 12 times her weight. After his health started to diminish, he wanted to turn his life around, and it took 14 firefighters to remove him from his home and transfer him to the UW Medical Center. Here, he went on one of the most rigorous weight loss journeys to ever happen, where the hospital put him on a 1,200 calorie diet and a heavy amount of diuretics. This was an extreme process, but it led to him losing over 900 pounds in 2 years, which was the largest amount of weight ever lost by a human at the time. And he's still top 3, and he's not number 3. Sadly, by the end of his life, he started to gain weight again, and died at around 800 pounds in 1983. John was so big, and such an anomaly at the time, his extra-large casket took up 2 burial spots in the Mount Pleasant Cemetery in Seattle. As for the second heaviest person to ever live, they're actually still alive. Khalid bin Masen Shari reached a peak of 1,370 pounds, and was the person to take the top spot from John as the person that lost the most ever weight in human history. And believe it or not, he lost 1,220 pounds, and now weighs a surprising 150 pounds. And he looks pretty happy too. But yeah, there may never be another person to ever challenge John for his title. Human euthanasia. There's no doubt this topic is a taboo, where many turn their heads and cast shame on those who would choose to depart from this world prematurely. But people like 28-year-old Jearrod Turbig intend to change that taboo, at least for a certain portion of the population. In the Netherlands, where Jearrod is from, around 5% of the population's cause of death is from euthanasia. But instead, from what some people find acceptable human euthanasia, where the patient has a terminal illness, this new group, that includes Zariah, wants to give rise to normalize access to euthanasia to people with non-terminal mental disorders, like anxiety, depression, bipolar, PTSD, and pretty much any of these types of disorders. 28-year-old Zariah, who is physically healthy, has a partner, pets, a home, and a seemingly perfect life, will only live to the age of 29, as her birthday is in May of 2024, but her euthanasia is also set for May of 2024. It's also important to mention she's been through many treatments for her autism, depression, and borderline personality disorder, which she struggles with daily, but none have helped her find solace. Where some people are outraged when they hear this, saying it's just killing people prematurely and they should still be kept alive against their will, others say that people who are willing to go through all the evaluations with doctors and other medical professionals and have them approve it, they were probably going to do it on their own anyways. But this way, at least they're going to go comfortable with the assistance of doctors. In the US, this is still only legal in 10 states, and only when the patient is terminally ill. Would it be bad to bring human euthanasia to the US for non-terminally ill mental disorders like anxiety? The top 5 biggest. Number 5. The biggest feet ever. Given one guess, it would be pretty obvious that the tallest man in the world has the biggest feet ever, and that guess would be correct, as 8'11" Robert Wadlow wore a size 37 AA shoe, and I don't even know what that means. But if you're a woman, it's very likely Robert's 18.5-inch foot is over 2 times the size of yours. And you know what they say, the bigger the foot, the bigger the... Number 4, banana. Or more specifically, the Hawaiian Huamoa banana, which, believe it or not, it's not even the very biggest. That title goes to the giant highland banana, whose taste is kinda sour. Sounds delicious, right? Number 3, the biggest goldfish ever, who grew to 67 pounds and whose nickname was Carrot. She's actually over 20 years old right now, and in 2022 when she was last seen, she was in great health, so she could also live another 10 years. Number 2, the California black sea hare is the world's largest slug. They look terrifying, but also kinda cute at the same time. Like, I'd love to own one, but I don't know if I'd hold it, you know? And number 1, the world's largest piano. Adrian Mann was 15 years old when he started building it, and had lots of help, but still only finished it at the age of 20. Why did he make it? I don't know, I'm not his daddy, but he did do it, so good job, or congratulations, or whatever. Gay animals. Male lions have been observed mounting each other one after another. This intimate act is now known as a bonding interaction, which is not uncommon in the animal kingdom, as giraffes and many other animals are known to do this as well. Yet, this act was denounced by Kenyan officials, where they happen to call the behavior not normal and the fault of watching gay tourists, though experts say this behavior is 100% normal, and the male lions mount each other during times of social stress to relieve their tension, which is similar to, say, bonobos, except all bonobos are bisexual. Male bonobos mount each other as bonding times and also to reduce tension. They do it with anyone at any time. They do it to say, I love you. They do it to say, I'm sorry. They even do it when aggression is high, so it can help everyone calm down. But it's not just the males, as most of the same-sex interactions actually come from the females. Over 60% of contact is female-to-female GG rubbing. Most bonobo cultures actually have a gang of lesbian bonobos that hang out with each other and generally avoid most males. So, yeah, apparently male lions put the pride in Pride Month. Top 10 states with the highest IQ. Number 10, Wisconsin. With an average IQ of 102.9, I guess there's a couple of smart cheeseheads. Number 9, Connecticut. With an average IQ of 103.1, but the next one, number 8, Iowa, was pretty unexpected, with an average IQ of 103.2. Number 7 is Maine, with an average IQ of 103.4. And number 6 surprised me the most, Montana, with an average IQ of 103.4. They only have like 30 people in the entire state, but I guess those people are pretty smart. Number 5, Minnesota, which is to be expected, with an average IQ of 103.7. I can definitely believe that. Like the next one, number 4, Vermont, with an average IQ of 103.8. But again, number 3 is unexpected, North Dakota, with an average IQ of 103.8. I definitely didn't expect him to be that smart. Unlike number 2, New Hampshire, with an average IQ of 104.2, since they've always seemed pretty smart. And the number 1 state with the highest average IQ is Massachusetts, with an IQ of 104.3. And it's boosted because of its student bodies that include Harvard University and MIT. Their students are far more intelligent than the average person, which helps them secure the top spot. The top 5 most gendered jobs in America. For women, number 5 is speech-language pathologist, where a whopping 94.3% of the field are women. Number 4, dental hygienists at 95.7% women. Number 3, legal secretaries and admin assistants at 96.4%. Number 2, preschool and kindergarten teachers at 96.7%, which is kind of a good point because I've never actually seen a male kindergarten teacher, and the number one most female-dominated field in the US, at a real whopping 99% being women, is skincare specialist. If you're a male skincare specialist in the US, sir, you are a different breed. And now, for the most male-dominated fields, number 5, at 98.3% men, logging workers, which I actually thought would be number 1. But number 4, up by 0.01%, bus and truck mechanics, who come in at 98.4% men. Number 3, up by another 0.01%, are brick masons, block masons, and stone masons, who sit at 98.5% men. Number 2, at 98.6% men, pipe layers. And the number 1 most male-dominated job in the US, construction equipment operators, at 99% men. So if you're a woman construction equipment operator, you, ma'am, are a different breed. You have herpes. I can say that with a higher statistical accuracy than saying you don't have herpes, and that's because 67% of the world's population has oral herpes. In the US, that number is possibly up to 80% if we count HSV1 and HSV2. That's right, 4 out of every 5 people have herpes, and that's just what we commonly consider herpes. Have you ever heard of the herpes virus, varicella zoster? Well, what if I call it by its more common name? Chickenpox. Yep, that's correct. Chickenpox comes from a herpes virus. Shingles comes from a herpes virus. Mono comes from a herpes virus. Even CMV retinitis comes from a herpes virus. And unlike things people will put in a similar category like syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia, which you can be cured of, herpes viruses are incurable. And once you get them, you have them for life. Whether they flare up or lay low and unnoticeable means pretty much nothing, because triggers can bring them back whenever they feel like it. This is because herpes can hide in nerve cells for decades, undetected by you before cropping up on your radar, like mono coming and going. And post-herpetic neuralgia, where the zoster virus comes back and inflames the nerves under your skin. You may be young and healthy now, but as your nervous system starts to age, herpes, which can lay dormant for 30 years at a time, could just decide to make its first appearance at 15, 20, or even in your 30s. So, like I said, I can say with statistical accuracy, you have one of these viruses in your body at this very moment. And cicadas are about to ruin America. This April, a 13-year cycle and a 17-year cycle brood of cicadas will sync up to create a super brood, where billions of cicadas will emerge from the ground when they sense warmth. These are the areas of the US that will experience this brood, but sadly, it will be worse in Illinois, as it has the most dense mixture of 13-year and 17-year broods. This so-called Swarmageddon happens every 221 years, and its last occurrence was in 1803. To remind you what they do, 13 years ago and 17 years ago, broods were born and buried into the ground where they've been living. Yes, there's teenager cicadas right now, but the biggest party of their lives are coming up, where they all come above ground, clamp onto something, and jump out of their molts. They'll now have wings and they'll be able to fly around, and most importantly, make this constant loud and annoying noise. Because this is a double brood, more of the US will have these scattered everywhere, and some people actually have an entomophobia reaction, stringing from their fear of insects, even though they're just molts. So if you have cicada anxiety or entomophobia towards cicada shells, 2024 is just not the year for you. Top 5 animals with the worst names. Number 5, the mountain chicken. This is not a chicken at all, it's just a stupid frog. But apparently the locals were eating these things like chicken, so it got the name mountain chicken. Also, it's critically endangered, so he's got a couple of bad things going for him. Number 4, the white-bellied go-away bird. I am so serious. And it's for one reason that I find a pretty big stretch. Apparently, its call sounds like it's saying, go away. I'll let you be the judge. Number 3, the fried egg jellyfish. It simply makes a list because of how disrespectfully accurate they decided to get with this one. The disappointing news is, it tastes like salt water nothing, so you're better off just drinking a little bit of ocean water than incorporating this into your breakfast rotation. Number 2, the giant thorny-headed worm of swine, which might be the most unintentionally rude name known to animal kind. They are large, they have horns on their head, and when they were discovered, they were attached to the walls of pig intestines. So somebody thought very literally, wow, this must be the giant thorny-headed worm of swine, which is definitely not creative, but they're also inside of raccoons in the US, so don't go eating raccoon chitlins. And number 1, the dick. Enough said. 5 animals that are way bigger than you thought. Number 5, camels. Dromedary camels in particular are the 6th largest land animal on the planet, with the top of their heads towering out over 8 feet tall. To put that into perspective, look at the door next to you. Okay, now a camel's head could be over a foot taller than that, but sadly, they're extinct in the wild, and there's actually only 950 wild camels in the entire world. Number 4, the moose. And though you probably already knew this one, since moose getting up to 7 feet tall, measured at the top of their heads, and even up to 8 feet tall at the top of their antlers, have been shared around the internet. That doesn't stop how surprisingly tall these guys are. Not to mention, they can weigh over 1,500 pounds, and run faster than Usain Bolt at 35 miles an hour. Just know, you don't want to anger these guys. Number 3. The ostrich. Let's line them up so far, so you can get a picture of how tall these guys are. The camel, the moose, and the ostrich, who has a maximum height of 9.2 feet. This is him next to the tallest NBA player, 7'4", Victor Wembanyama. They can get up to very creepy heights. Add that with the fact that they can pluck both your eyeballs out in under 3 seconds, and that's just enough for me to never want to do the little drive-through zoo. Number 2. American bison. They usually average around 6'6", but the largest bison ever recorded was shot in Montana and weighed 3,800 pounds and stood at 7 feet tall. To put that into perspective, the National Wildlife Federation says grizzlies weigh upwards of 700 pounds, so this bison weighed as much as 3 giant grizzly bears. And number 1, the Kodiak bear. I think we're all aware of how big polar bears are, and the Alaska Department of Fish and Game says the largest polar bear males can weigh in excess of 1,700 pounds. Now Clyde the Kodiak bear weighed 2,130 pounds. It was over 9 feet tall. Sadly, he passed away in 1987 at the Dakota Zoo, but no, a Kodiak bear is not a grizzly bear. Here's a grizzly, and here's a Kodiak. In all of Alaska, there's 30,000 grizzly bears, and on Kodiak Island, the second largest island in the US where the Kodiak bear is found, there are only 3,500. So if you ever saw a Kodiak bear, no you didn't. We have a new conspiracy on the market, and this one's from the Flat Earthers. They say a Boeing 747 carries 63,500 gallons of fuel. Where do they put it? This is a 60,000 gallon water tank for reference. Take as long as you need. As comedian Riley McGrath has said, plain big. But a 747 is likely a lot bigger than a random conspiracy theorist can imagine. For short, the fuel is stored in the wings. For long, the largest 747-8 Intercontinental carries 63,034 gallons. But the main tank 1 and 4 hold 5,320 gallons each. The main tank 2 and 3 hold 14,430 gallons each. The center wing holds 17,000 gallons, and the reserve tanks hold 1,534 gallons each. Add it all together, and we get 59,565. Though you can store 169 gallons in the surge tank, so let's add that, plus the horizontal stabilizers, which nobody ever uses, but it's possible to hold 3,300, and that gives you the 63,034 gallons. To show you a size comparison, here's your Boeing 747 next to a Boeing 737, which is something you'd probably imagine when you imagine a plane. The 737 weighs a little over 90,000 pounds. Jet fuel weighs around 6.72 pounds a gallon, so a Boeing 747 can carry over 400,000 pounds of fuel. Volume is a mind-bending metric, ain't it? Last but not least, let's give you guys a real one-to-one size comparison. Because the 747 you're comparing to is 246 feet long, 224 feet wide, and 63 feet tall, we're working with a monster. And this SCT-2704-VR water storage tank has a height of 22 feet tall and a diameter of 27 feet. Your little water storage would look like this next to a Boeing 747. And this is what it would look like from a top-down perspective. Tell me, do you think this can fit inside of this? The Earth is not flat, planes can fly around the globe, and they can also hold a lot of fuel. 5 maps of the USA. If obesity rates continue to rise at their current levels, by the year 2030, half of all Americans will have obesity. So if you have a mom, a dad, and a sibling, 2 of you will have obesity in 2030. Number 4. This is a map showing the most popular game console in every state. Apparently, the South prefers Sony, the West prefers Nintendo, and the North prefers a good old American Xbox.
Wait a minute!
Number 3. A map of every Waffle House location by state. Is it dirty? Yes. Is the customer service good? No. Will your drink taste like dish soap and cockroach eggs? Yes. But the food will hit every single time. Also, as far as I can tell, the very furthest you can get from a Waffle House in the state of Georgia is Broxton, Georgia. It's definitely not the best spot for a new Waffle House. Number 2. The most spoken language in the US is English, followed by Spanish. So this map is the most spoken language in every state that is not English or Spanish. If you live in the middle of nowhere, then learn German. And number 1, the most popular dog name by state. This map proves that if your dog's name is Bella or Luna, you are an NPC, and an uncreative one at that. 5 interesting stuff. Number 5. The species with the longest name is actually a bacteria, and its name is Myxococcus. Lanfer porongwinge gogere wendrobo Santa Cilia go go go. The bacteria is from the Myxococcaceae family, and they are found near the village of Lanfer porongwinge gogere wendrobo Santa Cilia go go go. Number 4. Leeches can be found on all continents and seas, aside from Antarctica. They love ponds, flooded areas, and are especially attracted to water disturbed near docks, like when you're wading in water. To avoid them, you should wear anti-leech protection socks, like this, or your ankles can look like this. In the winter, they're usually burrowed into mud, but come summertime, they'll feast on anything with a pulse. So reconsider your sock selection the next time you're going somewhere that's damp. Number 3. This man has what's called macrodactyly, which usually affects one hand or one foot and causes the bone and tissues in fingers or toes to become abnormally large. But luckily, aside from just looking concerning, it's not actually cancerous or dangerous in any way, and people with macrodactyly can live as happy and normal as a life as anyone. Number 2. This is what's called a Tibetan sky burial, where after passing, you're chopped into pieces and fed to sacred vultures. The locals see it as a gift back to the universe, as a way to show the insignificance of our earthly lives. Though it is eco-friendly, and actually a kind of beautiful concept, they are 100% illegal in the United States, and if your family tries it, they will be charged with a Class C felony, so don't get attached to the idea. And number 1. This is a two-headed calf, and its condition is called polycephaly. They are pretty rare, but they also die young, as the oldest two-headed calf on record, Lucky, got up to the age of 108 days old, so most farmers just shoot them in the head soon after birth. Two-headed calves usually have cleft palates, which makes feeding a tall task, and like most of them, Lucky kept getting food lodged in it. Their community donated over double the amount for the surgery, but the vet visit was a week too late, and Lucky's cleft palate ended up being her demise. Polycephaly is a 1 in 400 million occurrence for calves, so out of the 1 billion born every year, there are just 2 unlucky polycephaly calves.